Hi guys, let's hear something horror from us.
In the duty room, I was focused on watching the surveillance monitors. Suddenly, a disheveled woman leaned against the window in panic. With a face full of fear, she pleaded with me. "Officer, please. Help me. Help my brother." I quickly stepped out of the duty room to ask her, "What happened? Where is your brother?" At Greenview Apartments, 707. My brother, he's been killed. As the woman spoke, she covered her face and started sobbing uncontrollably. The situation was urgent, and we needed more information. However, all the officers on the night shift had been dispatched, and there was no other option. So I asked the new officer, Chris, to stay with the woman, and I went to the apartment complex alone to investigate. On the way to the apartments, I received a call from my mentor. It turned out that Chris, worried about me going alone, had called my mentor at home to tell him what was happening. He briefed my mentor on the situation. My mentor told me, "Don't act rashly when you arrive. Wait for me, and we'll go upstairs together." I agreed to wait. When I reached the apartment building, the place was eerily quiet. But logically, if a murder had taken place here, it shouldn't have been this calm. Unless that woman had only informed us about it. After discovering her brother's body, she came directly to the police station. But why didn't she just call the police? And the way she looked, she didn't seem like someone who had just discovered something, but more like someone who had escaped. In other words, it seemed more like she had escaped from the killer. Before reporting the crime, I walked into the apartment building. In the lobby, there was only a receptionist on duty. As my mentor hadn't arrived yet, I walked into the lobby by myself and decided to ask the receptionist a few questions. The receptionist was a young woman. Seeing me in uniform, she immediately stood up from her chair. I told her not to be nervous and that I just had a few simple questions. I asked, "Does this building have any other exits besides the main entrance?" She answered, "There are 2 exits in this building. One is the front door, and the other is the back door. But to use either exit, you have to pass by the front desk." I nodded, then asked, "Earlier, did you see a disheveled woman leave this building?" The receptionist frowned at first, then shook her head and said she hadn't. I didn't believe her, of course. So I asked her to pull up the surveillance footage. But strangely enough, the footage confirmed what she said. There was no disheveled woman leaving the building. Could it be that the woman was making a false report? I asked the receptionist again, "Is apartment 707 currently occupied?" She checked the computer and said, "No, 707 is currently unoccupied." With that confirmation, I went upstairs to take a look. Sure enough, 707 was an empty room. I was getting frustrated. Returning downstairs, I called Chris and asked if that woman had been lying. When she heard what I said, she burst into loud sobs, insisting that she wasn't lying. She claimed she had seen her brother die by the knife with her own eyes. It was because her brother protected her that she was able to escape the building alive. After hearing that, I turned around and looked at the quiet apartment building. It didn't look like a place where such a brutal crime had occurred. Just then, my mentor's call came through. By now, I had a pretty good idea. Either that woman was insane, or she was messing with us. So I instructed Chris to keep an eye on her, and ended the call. When I picked up my mentor's call, I was about to update him on the situation. But all I heard was a strange noise from the other side. Then the call disconnected. I was puzzled. I tried calling him back, but the message said the number was out of service. I stepped out of the building, thinking my mentor should have arrived by now. But I looked around and saw no sign of him. I dialed again, and this time, the message said his phone was turned off. I waited outside the apartment for 10 minutes, repeatedly calling my mentor. But the response was always that his phone was off. Something didn't feel right. I hurried back to the station and called my mentor's wife. She told me that earlier, after receiving a call from Chris, he had left the house, saying he had a case at Greenview Apartments, but after that, he hadn't updated her. Now, she couldn't reach him either. After hanging up with her, Chris called me, telling me that the woman had suddenly self-harmed and had been taken to the hospital. My mind was in complete disarray. I didn't even want to deal with the woman back at the station. Most of the other officers had returned from their calls. I told them about not being able to reach my mentor. Everyone at the station knew my mentor well. No matter where he went, he would always let someone know his location, because he was afraid that one day, on a mission, he might suddenly disappear without a trace. And now he had truly disappeared, without telling anyone where he went. Based on the other officers at the station all agreed that something must have happened to him on the way to Greenview Apartments. Everyone sprang into action. Some started pulling up surveillance footage. Others tried to trace my mentor's phone, and some went out into the streets to search for him. With everyone moving so quickly, I thought we would find him soon. But that search lasted 10 years. After my mentor's disappearance, I went from being a rookie officer who had just graduated from the academy to a seasoned veteran in the department. During those 10 years, no matter what happened, I never gave up looking for any sign of my mentor. even though everyone said he was gone. Even though people started to forget about him, I never stopped searching. Every night, I would watch the same surveillance footage over and over. It was footage from 10 years ago, capturing my mentor's last known route toward Greenview Apartments. According to my mentor's wife, that night, she had watched him leave the house, headed towards the apartment complex. On the phone that night, my mentor had personally told me he was on his way. But no matter how many times I checked the footage, I never saw any sign of him. Not on the streets, not in the apartment complex, not even on the cameras outside his house. It was as if he had vanished without a trace. There was no sign of him anywhere. It was as if he had disappeared from this world, without leaving a single clue behind. One night, I was working the night shift in the duty room as usual. That was when my apprentice, Luke, called me. "Boss, when I was on patrol just now, I just saw the mental patient who escaped from the mountain sanatorium. He's on top of an abandoned building right now, and it looks like he's about to jump." I asked him if he was alone. He said yes. After hearing that, I told him not to make any sudden moves and to wait for me before doing anything. Then Luke sent me his location. When I saw the address, I froze. It was the same place, Greenview Apartments, the same location from 10 years ago. At that moment, I had an overwhelming sense of unease. There was only one female officer left on duty. I asked her to cover my post, informed nearby officers to head to Greenview Apartments, and immediately drove to the location. On the way, I called Luke again, reminding him not to act on his own and to wait for me downstairs. But despite my instructions, when I arrived, he was nowhere to be seen. I was furious. Rushing into the building and heading up to the rooftop. At the top, I saw a disheveled woman, wearing a hospital gown from the mountain sanatorium, sitting on the ground. But Luke was nowhere in sight. I grabbed the woman roughly, and when I saw her face, countless memories flooded into my mind. It was her, the same woman who had reported the crime, the night my mentor disappeared. In a way, if it hadn't been for this woman's report, my mentor wouldn't have gone out that night, and he wouldn't have disappeared. Seeing the dazed look in her eyes, that bad feeling grew stronger. I cuffed her to myself, then called Luke again. "Sorry, the number you are calling is unavailable at the moment. Please try again later." Hearing the automated message, I froze. This was exactly like the night my mentor disappeared. The same scenario. I couldn't understand. I didn't know why this was happening. While I was still in shock, I suddenly felt a tug on my wrist. Turning to look, I saw that the woman had unlocked her cuff and fastened the other end of it to a pipe. As I fumbled with the key, she had already run to the edge of the roof. She turned to face me, muttering something under her breath. I slowly approached her, trying to calm her down, telling her not to do anything rash. But she wasn't listening. Her feet moved closer and closer to the edge. Just as she was about to fall, I lunged forward, grabbing onto her clothes tightly. But then she started squirming, trying to slip out of her clothing. Stop. You'll die. Think about your family, your friends, your teachers, your classmates. I was trying to talk her down, but hearing those words only made her struggle harder. Her clothes were loosening quickly, and just before she slipped and fell, she kept muttering under her breath, "The rules don't exist. The rules don't exist."